She looked at me like she already knew what I wanted, before I even knew how to want it. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day that smells like rain before it starts. I was sitting by the cafe window, pretending to read, when she walked in, trench coat slightly damp at the cuffs, hair swept back but rebelliously escaping in a few dark strands. She paused by the counter, and for a second, it felt like the room shifted to make space for her. Elena. She used to teach literature at the university, the kind of teacher who made silence feel intelligent. I hadn't seen her in over a year. Back then, she was just someone I couldn't stop watching from the back row. Now she was here, and older in a way that only made her more deliberate. She noticed me first. Or maybe she pretended to. Her eyes flicked toward mine, one small glance, quick, assessing. Then she smiled, a slow recognition, like she was leafing through a memory before deciding to open it. "Still hiding behind books?" she said, stepping closer. I tried to smile back, but the words stuck somewhere between my chest and throat. "Trying to look smarter than I am," I managed. She laughed softly, and that was worse, or better, than I expected. The sound of rain started tapping against the glass, polite at first, then heavier. She took the seat across from me without asking, setting her coffee down with a kind of graceful finality. The steam curled between us like something alive. I didn't know what to do with my hands. She noticed, I'm sure she did, because she tilted her head slightly, that half-smile of hers returning. "You always look like you were about to say something important," she said. "But you never did." "Maybe I didn't know how," I said. She held my gaze a moment too long. "You still don't?" Something in my stomach tightened. It wasn't the words, it was the quiet after. The cafe noise seemed to dissolve around us, spoons stirring, chairs scraping, rain beating harder. I could feel the warmth of her knee, just barely brushing mine under the table. Probably accidental. Probably. She took a slow sip of coffee, eyes still on me. "What are you working on now?" she asked. "Illustrations," I said. "Freelance." Her brow lifted slightly. "You finally did it." There was pride in her tone, but something else too, something faint, almost regretful. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but I couldn't. Instead, I watched a drop of rain slide down the window behind her, tracing the shape of her reflection. Her perfume was faint, something woody, not sweet, and every time she leaned forward I caught it. It made the air between us heavier. She asked if I still drew people. I nodded. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly faces I can't forget." Her lips parted like she was going to say something, then closed again. The silence stretched. She looked down at her cup, fingers tracing the rim. "Careful," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Some faces are better left unfinished." And just like that she stood. The movement startled me, graceful, but final. She reached for her bag, adjusting the strap on her shoulder. "It's good to see you, Noah." I wanted to stop her, to say something that would keep her there, but the words wouldn't come. She gave me one last look, the kind that lands somewhere between a warning and an invitation. Then the door opened. A gust of cold air rushed in, and she was gone. The bell above the door kept ringing long after she'd left, as if the room hadn't realized she wasn't coming back. It was 2 weeks before I saw her again. By then, I'd already replayed that cafe moment too many times. The way her eyes lingered, the rain between us, the quiet that felt like a secret neither of us wanted to own. When her name appeared in my inbox, it didn't feel real. Department Alumni Exhibit, Illustration Collaboration Opportunity, the subject line read. At the bottom, her signature. Just that. No message, no greeting. We met at her office. The same one where I'd once nervously handed in essays and pretended her approval didn't matter as much as it did. She stood by the window when I walked in, the afternoon light falling unevenly across her hair. "You came," she said softly, as though she hadn't been sure I would. "I didn't think you'd remember me," I said. She smiled faintly. "You're difficult to forget." That line sat in the air a little too long. "We talked about the project, an art and literature exhibit," she said, pairing her written reflections with my drawings. Professional, simple. It should have been easy. But everything between us hummed with an undertone neither of us named. When she handed me her first set of drafts, her fingers brushed mine. Not an accident. Or maybe I just wanted to believe it wasn't. Her writing was raw, pieces about isolation, aging, and the silence that follows being loved for the wrong reasons. I didn't tell her how much it hurt to read them. I just nodded, pretending to study the words, while really watching the shape of her hands as she spoke. Her wedding ring was gone. I noticed that before she ever mentioned it. Later, when she did, it was almost offhand. I moved out last year, she said without looking at me. Some endings are quieter than they should be. I didn't know what to say. My silence seemed to please her. She looked up from her notes, her expression unreadable. You've never been very good with small talk, she said. Maybe I like saying nothing when it matters most, I replied. She looked at me then, really looked. The kind of look that starts as curiosity and ends somewhere dangerous. We worked late. The room dimmed, the lamps casting gold on her face. Every time she leaned close to check a sketch, I could feel her breath, warm, deliberate, pulling at the edges of my restraint. At one point, she reached over my shoulder to adjust a line on the paper. Her hand rested there a second too long, and I forgot how to breathe. She must have felt the way my body tensed, because she drew her hand back slowly, her fingertips grazing my sleeve. Sorry, she said quietly. Old habit. But she didn't move away. The silence after that was different, not awkward, but charged, fragile, and real. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She didn't answer. When I finally looked up, she was already watching me, the same way she had at the cafe, like she could see everything I hadn't said. Her lips parted, then closed again. Let's stop here for tonight, she whispered, though neither of us moved. For a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to that breath between us, her closeness, my heartbeat, the warmth of something that shouldn't exist. And then she turned off the lamp. The darkness didn't end anything. It only made the space between us feel alive. It started with a late text. Can you drop by the studio tomorrow? I need to review the sketches in person. It was nearly midnight. I told myself not to read too much into it. But when I arrived the next afternoon, she'd already made coffee, already cleared the table, like she'd been waiting. The window was open, letting in the kind of wind that moves papers just enough to be inconvenient. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said, You're early. You sounded like you needed help. Her laugh was small, tired. That obvious? She wore no makeup this time. It made her look younger, softer, or maybe just more real. We sat side by side, going over the illustrations. She leaned close, pointing at a detail I'd missed. Her voice was low, her shoulder brushing mine. The room was too quiet. Every sound, the turn of a page, the scrape of a pencil, her slow breath, seemed amplified. At one point, she reached for her mug, her hand grazing mine. Neither of us moved. Her touch was light, unintentional on the surface, but her fingers stayed there a second too long. The air changed. I could see the pulse in her throat. She noticed me looking and shifted slightly, though not away. We shouldn't. She started, but didn't finish. Before either of us could speak again, a knock hit the door. She froze. The voice that followed was cheerful, male, a colleague. Elena? You in there? Her hand flew off mine. She stood too quickly, bumping the table. 1 second! She called, her tone suddenly formal. Papers scattered. My heart pounded in the silence between knocks. She smoothed her blouse, checked her hair, and opened the door just wide enough to speak through it. I caught bits of their conversation, something about scheduling, the exhibit, logistics. Normal words. Too normal. When she closed the door again, she didn't look at me right away. Her hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her mug. That was close, she said, voice low. I tried to sound calm. Would it really be so bad if someone saw us? She looked up sharply. Yes. That one word hit hard, not because of what it meant, but because of how it sounded, not angry, just frightened. She sat down again, slower this time. The space between us was smaller now. You're young, she said. People love to make stories out of things they don't understand. I wanted to tell her that I didn't care, that I'd never seen anyone the way I saw her. But I didn't. I just watched as her hand trembled against the cup. Without thinking, I reached out, steadying it. My fingers covered hers, firm but careful. She didn't pull away. Her eyes lifted to mine, that same unreadable mix of want and warning. The world outside the window went quiet. The wind stopped. Her voice, when it came, was barely there. Noah! It sounded like both a plea and an apology. Neither of us moved, but everything inside us did, hearts, breath, restraint. If I had leaned in just an inch more, it would have happened. The kiss, the collapse of all that careful distance. But she turned her face away, eyes closed. "Not yet," she whispered. And still, neither of us let go. The exhibit was only a week away. We were supposed to be finalizing layouts, text pairings, and lighting placement. But none of that mattered anymore. The space we rented was an old classroom repurposed for art events, tall windows, pale walls, faint echoes. She was already there when I arrived, moving slowly between the easels, touching the corners of each canvas like she was afraid to smudge the air itself. "You've been avoiding me," I said. She didn't turn. "I've been busy. You haven't replied to a single message." "That's not true." "It is," I said quietly. "You've read them." The tension between us was no longer something that crept in, it lived there, in every unfinished sentence. Finally, she turned. "You think I don't feel it too?" she said, her voice low, trembling around the edges. "You think it's easy, pretending none of this is happening?" Her honesty hit harder than I expected. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I took a step toward her. "Elena," I started, but she shook her head. "This isn't supposed to happen," she said. "You're 25. You have your whole life in front of you." "I'm exactly where I want to be," I cut in. Her eyes met mine. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. I closed the space between us, not enough to touch, but enough to feel the warmth radiating off her skin. She exhaled sharply, the sound breaking something inside me. Her hands tightened around the folder she was holding. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered. "Then show me," I said. The folder slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a dull slap. She looked down, then up again, eyes shining in a way that wasn't just desire, it was fear, longing, maybe both. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said. I reached out, slow, careful, fingers brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She didn't move. My hand lingered near her cheek, close enough to feel her breath. Her pulse fluttered visibly at her throat. "You're making this impossible." Maybe it already was. Her eyes closed for half a second, just long enough for me to notice the tremor in her lips. When she opened them, the restraint was gone. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand what this would cost me." "Then tell me not to want you," I said. She stared at me like I'd said something unforgivable. "Don't," she breathed, but her body didn't move away. The air between us burned. She leaned forward, just slightly, enough that her forehead brushed mine. It was the smallest contact imaginable, but it felt like falling. For one heartbeat, everything stopped, the outside world, the sound of traffic, even the thought of consequence. And then, the door creaked open. We jumped apart as the curator's voice echoed through the doorway. "Oh, sorry, didn't realize anyone was still here." Elena's breath caught. Her hand was still trembling at her side. I turned toward her, whispering so only she could hear. "This isn't over." She didn't answer. But the look she gave me, equal parts warning and promise, said everything. The next morning, the world went back to pretending nothing had happened. But something had. I could still feel the ghost of her skin near mine, that nearly kiss suspended like a breath we hadn't finished taking. I told myself to move on. She didn't write. I didn't either. Then the email came. Private meeting. Urgent. No signature. Just a time and a place, her office. When I arrived, she was standing by her desk, arms folded, face unreadable. The blinds were half closed, striping her skin with pale bars of light. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach dropped. "About the exhibit?" She shook her head once. "About us." The word us was quieter than I expected. Before I could say anything, she slid a printed email across the desk. My name was highlighted in the subject line, concerns about faculty, alumni boundaries. Someone had seen us. My throat went dry. "Who?" "Doesn't matter," she said, cutting me off. "What matters is that people are talking. That they think something's happening." I swallowed hard. "Something is happening." Her eyes flashed, fear or anger, I couldn't tell. "Don't say that here." The silence after that was heavy, suffocating. She pressed her hands flat on the desk, knuckles pale. "I can't lose this position. Not after everything." I wanted to reach for her, to tell her she wasn't alone in it. But she stepped back before I could move. Her body language said one thing, her eyes said another. Her breathing was uneven, shallow. "Who told them?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then said, I think it was Daniel. The curator? She nodded. He stopped by yesterday. Right after you left. Something inside me twisted. You told him nothing happened. I told him we were collaborating, she said, voice breaking slightly. But maybe I didn't sound convincing enough. I took a step closer. She didn't retreat this time. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. Her hands trembled at her sides. Because I didn't trust myself. The words hung there, fragile and dangerous. I exhaled slowly, then said what had been sitting in my chest for weeks. You think this is just about want? It's not. I don't, she whispered, stepping closer now, almost in defense. Her voice shook. Don't say something you can't take back. I already did, I said. The second I looked at you like you were mine. Her breath caught. She turned away, one hand on the back of her chair to steady herself. The muscles in her arm trembled. Noah! I could hear her heartbeat in the silence. She turned back to face me. Her expression was torn between wanting to fight and wanting to give in. Then, quietly, if we keep going, there's no undoing it. I nodded. Maybe that's the point. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached for the blinds, twisting them shut, sealing out the world. Her hand lingered on the cord, and when she turned around, her eyes had changed, softer, surrendering. She took one slow step toward me. This is the last time, she said. But we both knew it wasn't. The room felt smaller than it ever had before. The blinds were shut. The late afternoon light leaked through in thin stripes that found her face, her throat, the trembling space between her hands. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence wasn't empty, it was waiting. She stood near the desk, the papers from our project scattered like abandoned alibis. Her hair had come loose, one strand catching against her lip. I wanted to reach out, to fix it, or to ruin everything completely. When she finally looked up, her voice came low. We can't keep pretending this doesn't exist. I took a slow step closer. Then don't. She shook her head, but her body didn't move away. If I let this happen, I lose more than just a job, Noah. I could hear the fracture in her voice, the strain of someone trying to stay composed while her heart was already running ahead of her. Then tell me to leave, I said. Tell me you don't feel it. Her eyes flicked to mine, defiant, exhausted, honest. You know I can't. The words were almost a confession. I stepped closer again, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath. My chest rose against hers. She whispered, You're making this impossible. I'm just here, I said. Her hand lifted as if to push me away, but it landed against my chest instead. Her fingers curled into my shirt. I didn't move. Neither did she. The air around us thickened, breath, warmth, heartbeat. Every second stretched too long. I've thought about this, she said quietly. Too many times. In the cafe, in my office, every time I saw your name in my inbox. I swallowed, afraid that any sound might break whatever fragile thing was holding us together. Her hand slid up, brushing against my neck, slow, uncertain. You don't make me feel young, she said. You make me feel seen. That undid me. I leaned in, not enough to cross the line, but enough that our foreheads touched. Her skin was cool. My pulse wasn't. For a moment, the world existed only in that breath between us. The weight of every reason not to do this pressed against the want that refused to fade. Her voice cracked the silence. If we do this, it changes everything, I whispered. It already did. The clock ticked once, loud and final. And then she kissed me, not desperate, not young, but slow and unguarded, like an apology and a beginning at once. It lasted only a heartbeat before she pulled back, eyes wet, mouth trembling. That's all we get, she said, half smiling, half broken. I nodded, though my hands still hovered near her waist, unable to let go just yet. We stood there, not teacher and student, not young and old, just two people caught in the small, impossible space between what they wanted and what they could live with. And in that stillness, I finally understood. She hadn't looked at me because she knew what I wanted. She'd looked at me because she wanted it too. The exhibit opened 3 weeks later. People moved quietly through the gallery, murmuring, pointing, pretending not to feel the weight of the work. Our work. Her words and my drawings lined the walls, side by side, breathing the same air. I stood near the back, watching her from a distance. Elena wore a soft gray dress, simple and elegant. Her hair was pinned up again, but one strand, always one, had escaped to rest against her neck. When her eyes found me, she smiled. Small, private. The kind that meant she remembered everything. After the crowd thinned, I drifted closer. She was talking to the curator, polite, professional, unreadable. The conversation ended, and for a second, we were alone again, surrounded by our shared silence. You did well, she said softly. So did you. She turned to one of the pieces, the last one in the line. It was a charcoal sketch of her hands, drawn from memory, open and reaching. Below it, her caption, "Some things are beautiful because they cannot stay." When she noticed me watching her read it, she laughed quietly. You always draw what I'm trying not to say. And you always write what I'm afraid to feel, I said. The honesty hung there, fragile but safe this time. We didn't need to hide it anymore, not from each other, at least. We walked out together once the gallery emptied, the evening air cool and clean. The street lights made long shapes on the pavement. I thought about quitting, she said after a while. After the rumors. I know. But then I saw the work finished, she continued. And I realized maybe I was running from something that was never meant to be hidden. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the quiet steadiness in her eyes. The fear had softened into something gentler. She stopped walking. The silence stretched again, comfortable this time. What happens now? I asked. She smiled faintly, stepping closer until her shoulder brushed mine. We stopped pretending it didn't mean anything. Her hand slipped into mine, careful at first, then certain. The warmth of it was enough to dissolve every leftover doubt. We stood like that for a while, two people who had almost ruined everything, but didn't. The city moved around us, cars passing, a siren far away. Life kept going, as it always does, but slower somehow. I turned toward her, brushing my thumb against her wrist. She leaned in, not for a kiss this time, but for something smaller, truer, her forehead against mine, a quiet exhale that felt like forgiveness. No grand declarations, no promises. Just the stillness of two people finally unafraid of what they'd found. When she pulled back, her smile was soft, tired, real. You're going to be fine, she said. So will you, I whispered. And for once, we both believed it.